The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar, Best Practices for Automating Your Accounts Payable Process. As many of you may know, you're in listen-only mode, but we still want to hear your questions. So please feel free to submit your questions in the question box below, and this presentation will be recorded and sent out after the webinar. And I have some exciting news to share with you today. So AvidXchange will be offering a virtual card from MasterCard for $50 for anybody attending the webinar today. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a poll of the best way you want to be contacted. There'll be three options. Would you like to see a custom demo of AvidXchange? Would you like more information on AP automation? Or are you just here to learn? And from that poll, we'll select a winner. So hello again, my name is Gabby Hurst. I'm with SWK. I'm the sales director for AvidXchange. I have Mark Palumbo, our partner alliance manager, on the call from AvidXchange, and Rebecca Magner from our SWK development team. She's our senior system architect. So for today's agenda, we'll talk about why does your business need to automate the AP process? How does AP automation work? An overview of the AvidXchange solution and our Stage 100 integration, which we are super excited to announce today. And then Mark will be sharing a case study from the Maxwell Group. So why does my business need to automate the AP process? And that's a great question. The top reasons you need to automate your AP process is to create efficiency, scalability for growth, and security, which we'll talk about those throughout the demonstration today. So I'd like to stop here and gather a poll from the audience. I always get curious to see how many of you people think that, or what does the typical AP staff spend on automating manual tasks in the AP process. So what does that look like? How many hours would you guess? Would you guess 6, 8, 2, all day, 2 days? If you could put it in the question box real quick, that way I can get a quick poll of how many people would guess, and then I'll share with you the answer. Okay, looks like I have one guess so far, 2 guess. Okay, so I'm seeing 6, 8, 2 days. Actually, the answer is, and it wasn't a trick question, it's 4 hours the average AP staff member spends on manual tasks each day. Wouldn't you like to get those 4 hours back for each employee? And when we can give back that time, it creates, again, efficiency, so you can, create faster processing time, accuracy, and less data entry throughout the day. Another way AvidXchange can increase efficiency is we offer approvals via mobile applications or anywhere. So with our web portal, you can access it through any web link. You can access it on your phone. You can approve invoices anywhere and payments, anywhere you go. We had one CFO that shared his success story where, he was spending a couple hours a day in traffic in a dead still, and he was able to approve invoices, on his way into work and free up that time for when he was actually at the office. And how great would that be? So when creating efficiencies, we also create room for growth. So again, wouldn't it be nice with these efficiencies that you can eliminate 60% of your manual tasks throughout the day? And when we eliminate those manual tasks, we can take the average operational time of 12 days of processing an invoice before automation to, on average, 3.5. Again, how great would that be? And when you're able to free up that time, it gives you time to focus on other areas in your organization. You can, assure that you have better supplier relationships. You can offer, better discounts because there is a faster process. It gives you time to focus on, financial reporting that you need to issue to the staff. Then again, you can work on, tax audits, give them more adequate time to go over and look at that process. Getting better visibility into your company, and then it gives you time to work on your company's budget. Plus, you're saving time on staff, working on the AP process, so that gives back to your company's budget. So with that being said, we have Mark Palumbo on the line. He's going to be sharing, a couple of success stories on the security side and why security and fraud is important to look at your organization as you process the AP automation.
Hello, can you hear me, Gabby?
I can, Mark.
Oh, great. Okay, I thought I was in listen-only mode.
No,
Yeah,
you're
thank
fine.
you for inviting me in to speak to the team today. I'm really excited that SWK has put together another webinar here around AP automation and AvidXchange. And yeah, I'd just like to talk to you briefly about control and security. If you want to go to the next slide. So yeah, we've had a number of stories nationwide of companies that get hit by check fraud, and I always laugh because and we have our number one goal and mission in life is really to help companies move off of paper checks onto an electronic form of payment, whether it be an ACH or virtual card payment. And I constantly hear from a number of mid-market and small customers we talk to, oh, my vendors and suppliers would never take a virtual card. Oh, they'll never take an ACH. We have to send out checks. And in fact, over, I think it's 46 to 51%, depending on what analyst firm you talk to, are that many checks are still being sent out on a day-to-day basis. When you look at our partners in Europe or Mexico, South America, they're almost 90+% electronic payments. So the U.S. is still way behind moving off paper checks. And what's an even worse stat is that over 75% of small businesses that are hit with some type of payment fraud, it's actually related to their paper check stock. And so people that think that their paper checks are more secure because it was signed by them, or that a paper check is more secure than an electronic form of payment, should probably go watch that movie, Catch Me If You Can, by Leonardo DiCaprio and team, where they talk about this guy who, I forgot his name, but he was a famous swindler who went back and defrauded American Airlines and a number of other companies of, essentially thousands upon thousands of dollars. We also had a story here in Houston, Texas, where I'm based, with Memorial Hermann Hospital System, where they hired an AP clerk. This person came in, unfortunately, they did not do a background check on him, and he had been formerly in prison and continued to take his, his criminal ways into the workforce. And he was able to get access to their ERP system. And as an AP clerk, he created 37 dummy vendor accounts, 37 individual PO boxes in and around the Houston metropolitan area, and over a period of 3 years, siphoned off over $10 million in vendor payment fees to these dummy accounts he created. And what was sad about that is that if they had a system like AvidXchange or any AP automation system that was worth their grain of salt, they'd actually be able to have all of those invoices and payments time-stamped and dated, so you can actually see who approved it, where it went out. The auditors would catch it, but unfortunately, their system was not automated, and this guy's now in jail. But it was a huge embarrassment for the hospital system, and again, could have been easily caught using an AP automation system. Next slide, please, Gabby. So, what we do with AvidXchange is, again, every transaction, whether it is an invoice transaction, invoice coming in being indexed, we have a team of indexers that work nationwide. So when those invoices come in, we'll actually help you look at the header line detail, verify, hey, this company doesn't seem to have a website, or maybe it's a PO box and we can't find an address, or they don't have a D&B number. If we see any type of red flags about an invoice that comes in on your account, that'll get flagged as an exception for your team to look at, and you'll get an email response. You can actually go back and take a look to see if it's an actual valid transaction or not. And on the payment side, likewise, all of our payments are made via Positive Pay, so we also have the ability to write checks on your behalf. They're done electronically. You sign the checks electronically in the system via the cloud, and we have check printing facilities on the East Coast and West Coast, so those will actually get to your vendor in time. But the cool thing about how our payments work is, and we'll talk about this later on as well, your vendors actually have a choice of how they'd like to get paid. And in fact, there's a good chance that if we do a free vendor match analysis for you, which you can talk to your SWK salesperson about, we'll actually take a look at your vendor file, and we'll actually do a match on the current supplier network that we have. We have over 400,000 suppliers in our AvidPay network today. There's a good chance that 20 to 30% of your existing vendors are already in the network. So when people say, oh, my vendors will never take a virtual card in ACH, there's a good shot that out of those 20 to 30% that are already in our network, a good chunk of those are already accepting virtual card or an ACH payment from AvidXchange. So that's another set of pay control features that we have. which will help you in terms of being sure that those, again, checks are on positive pay. So we're going to verify the amounts from the vendors, be sure that they're in the account before they go out, and at the same time, if they're done electronically, we know that ACH and virtual cards are way more secure than a blank paper check stock. So let's go on to the next slide. Yep, thank you. So these are the 3 ways, again, just reiterating how we give your vendors choices of how they like to get paid. It's a really simple conversation. We have a call center team both in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we're headquartered, as well as our new office in Salt Lake City. And so that's essentially how it sounds is we call up your vendors, hey, Acme Corporation has recently chosen AvidXchange to be their outsourced payment supplier. We have a check here in the amount of $1,200, let's say. I want to verify your bill to remit to address. And then once the vendor says yes, we'll send a check in the mail. We always send the first payment via paper check because we don't want to disrupt your current process. But the very next question that we'll ask them is we'll say, hey, would you like to get paid faster in the future if they're not already in our network? And if they're not in our network and they're intrigued by that and they say yes, then we have a payment specialist call them back and go through how a virtual card payment works or how an ACH enhanced direct deposit works into their account. Probably 90+% of our electronic payments actually go through virtual card because most companies nowadays are accounting merchant services fees into their cost of goods sold. So we'll, first the payment specialist will say, hey, do you guys accept MasterCard accepted form of payment? If the vendor says yes, they'll say, hey, instead of getting this check via snail mail every time from Acme Corp, would you guys like to put this on your MasterCard account? And you'll be surprised how many vendors and suppliers will say yes to that because they've already accounted that merchant services fee from their local bank or their merchant service provider. And again, you don't pay the fee as the client of AvidXchange. Your suppliers choose whether they want to get a check or pay that fee to their merchant service provider to get paid faster. The other cool thing about virtual cards related to security and control is that every time a vendor elects to get that virtual card payment, we have a unique relationship with MasterCard, who's our B2B payment supplier. And what MasterCard does for us is they generate a unique randomly created account number every time that invoice needs to get paid or new invoice needs to get paid. So essentially, it is its sole purpose in life, and sometimes they'll call it a ghost card, is to make that one invoice payment. So if it's a payment for $1,200, once that payment gets made via that randomly created virtual card, it's then deleted, it's gone. So we keep a track record of that in the history. It's timestamped and dated, but there's no way for anybody to hack that account or to get into that account because its sole purpose, its sole mission in life was to make that one payment for that one invoice. So very, very secure. It's probably one of the most secure ways to make a payment via virtual card. So I just want to be sure everybody's clear about how that works. The other cool thing is, we talked about this probably a little later, but I'll mention it now, is that for the merchant services fees that we earn on the payments that for your vendors, we'll actually do a rebate share back to the business as a reward. Kind of think of like cashback rewards on a consumer card. Think of this as cashback rewards to your business. So the more payments that we route through this electronic payments network could actually result in dollars back to the business that will either help to fund all of the AvidPay service or a good chunk of the AvidPay and AvidInvoice services when you bundle them together. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabby.
Absolutely. So how does AP automation work? And that's a great question. Just going over a little bit what your existing status might look like and how AvidXchange can change that for you. And then I'm going to turn it over to demonstrate AvidXchange Invoice, and Rebecca's going to show the Sage 100 integration. So life before Avid, this is probably what your typical AP process looks like. Again, you're receiving a lot of manual invoices, opening email, opening the mail, you're going over through manual PO approval processes, and then once it's approved, then you're cutting checks. If you see here now, this is where all the places where AvidXchange can, change that process. And we'll talk about how the invoices are loaded to AvidXchange in the next slide. But again, the mail is sent to the AvidXchange lockbox. You can forward them to the email, and then the approval process, can be automated. And then again, as Mark had mentioned, the pay network, that can be automated as well. So before I show you the AvidXchange invoice piece, we have to get the invoices to AvidXchange. And so we have 3 ways of approaching that. You can have your suppliers who are emailing you invoices currently send it to a dedicated email for your company. You can scan them in manually to AvidXchange, or you can send them to the AvidXchange lockbox service where the invoices are received, they're reviewed, they're keyed in, they're coded, they're smart coded. And then once they are coded and once they are received either via email or paper, they're uploaded to the AvidXchange portal. And that's what I'm going to show you here. So this is the AvidXchange portal. So the nice thing about this, and I know a lot of different, solutions out there, they charge you per user, they are really strict on security rules. AvidXchange does not charge you for having additional approvers in the system. You can most certainly create security roles around different users and different departments. You can have a main admin, you can have multiple admin. So I'm going to log in as an admin. And as I log in, I can see all the invoices that AvidXchange has loaded into the portal. You can create a manual, or you can manually put an invoice in. We don't recommend that just because of audit reasons, but you can have that option here. You can also have the option to change what this display would look like. You can add additional columns. These are the ones I prefer. Again, it cleans up your screen, looks at important information that you would need for approval process. Again, you can add any additional information here just by clicking it, then the column would generate, and then you can remove it. You can also sort by dates and different criteria on each column as well. And on the left here, these are going to be the products available to you. So if you just strictly have Avid Invoice, you would just have the tab here. And if you have Avid Pay, this would also be located here, and the admin tab. And we'll go into the admin tab later when I show you batching. So you're going to click on the invoice to review all the detail here. Again, this has all been coded by AvidXchange. That's been available, again, on the invoice. And all this information is available here. I will point out there is not a PO number associated with this particular invoice, but when Rebecca shows the Sage 100, and then when you are entering them, if there is a PO associated with that invoice, you would need to make sure that that's the appropriate one for the invoice allocated in Sage. When it goes over the batching, then it will match the invoice. Here is going to be the property attributes. Again, this is smart coded, so it will only give you the GL codes that are associated with your ERP system. Here is an image of the invoice. You can associate any attachments that were not along with the invoice that you may need. You can enter comments on these invoices. Again, and you can also create workflow. So if the invoice needs to be approved by multiple people, you can assign that. They would receive an email of approval. If they do not approve it within a certain time, you can also escalate that and have a second approver. It also is based on dollar amount. And then here on this tab, this is also additionally important. We talk about, the fraud and auditing process. Here we'll give you all the notes of anybody that's ever touched the invoice. We do not remove any information. We do historically archive after 7 years, but all this information will be located here. And again, you can approve it through this screen. So we're going to go back to the home page. You can batch approve these or multiple approve these, or you can do them individually. And now I'm going to go to the admin tab. And here I have my batch of approved invoices that are going to go to Sage 100. Now this is the piece where Rebecca is going to pick up and show you from our Sage integration and how that's going to work. Once you approve this batch, it will be sent over to the ERP system through AvidSync. So Rebecca, I'm going to make you presenter.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Let me choose the screen. And can you see my screen, Gabby?
I can. Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start in Avid real quickly and review some of the postings that are required for the Avid invoice so that it processes to Sage properly. If you have an accounts payable invoice, as Gabby indicated, there is some smart coding. If you need to alter that, you need to do that within Avid, and you can alter it and it pulls your Sage GL codes. The accounts payable all gets distributed at the bottom of the invoice. You can add a PO number for accounts payable, verbal per Joe, things like that. That information will go over and post into accounts payable invoicing. If you have an invoice that's supposed to be integrated to purchase order, you would go in and under PO make sure that it had a valid PO number. So, you know, the 7-digit PO number. The internal memo remarks, if you process in Sage and you process your receipt of goods and you post and update them prior to processing your receipt of invoice, then the G number for that receipt must go here, because at that point we will pull whatever was processed in the receipt into the receipt of invoice. The bottom smart coding we don't even look at. Once we get into Sage, we pull all GL postings from Sage. Now, as Gabby indicated, you would go into your batching and you would export, and that export to the batching would be to a particular place within the Sage server system so that we could pull that information. In Sage, we integrate with multiple companies. We can indicate which companies have AvidInvoice. When we do AvidPay, we'll indicate which ones have AvidPay. We push over vendor information, and as you change vendor information, that information is then updated into Avid via AvidSync. We have an export process for Sage GL and an export process for Sage budgets so that you can get those into Avid as well. The Avid process is on the accounts payable menu. There's an AvidXchange menu for all the exports. I've put them at my top of the screen for ease. The process will process both receipt of invoice and receipt of goods. The receipt of goods is if you want to do a one-step invoicing process so that you can utilize the lot serial and or landed cost functionality within Sage. So you would have your invoice come into Avid, it would export, the file would be out there, and then you import it into Sage. It's in a predefined format to make that import possible. I had some fail automatically just to show you what the batch looks like. As you can tell, I have 2 that failed, and that's because I had completed purchase orders. You can't receive them if they're already completed. The other ones have been approved. There's a P and purchase order. The logs are all saved out on the system so that you can review them. The process that I ran manually. You can also run this process automatically by automating it through Windows Scheduler or one of those functions. Invoice date entry for accounts payable. My batch imported, and as you see, the comment is indicating that it's an Avid. This date and time will indicate the same first field of the batching. It is automated from when you export it from Avid. This particular invoice is the one that I showed you. It has all the breakdowns of it. In accounts payable, you could run the journal and post and go. Now, for the receipt of invoice and the receipt of goods, I did have a receipt of invoice because I have a purchase order that I did a partial receive. So I had previously done a receipt of goods, and this is the invoice that matches. And then on this particular one, the 10045, this is an invoice that is for a partial receipt of goods that I have done previously. So this is the invoice that matches that. And then the other side of that is now in receipt of goods because I received my second shipment. Now this particular one is in a hold batch. We create a hold batch for items that need reviewed and reconciled. Either the freight didn't match the freight on the invoice, things that you did not reconcile in Avid, but don't quite match either the original purchase order or if it's a whole batch and receipt of invoice, the original receipt of goods. For this particular one, it's the same invoice. When you do a receipt of goods and have an invoice that matches one in the receipt of invoice, it will merge them together upon updating of the journals, and you'll have the full invoice. This way you could do one invoice for an item that you've previously received some and that you are now receiving. In this particular case, this one is in hold status because they have lot serial items. These items need to be reconciled and distributed in the receipt of goods prior to me being able to switch it, and then I can transfer the document to the proper batch and get it out of the hold batch. Items that are in the regular batch could just be updated through the journal and reviewed that way unless you needed to add something else to it. It will pull all items from the purchase order, miscellaneous charges, miscellaneous items, special items, as I've noted here. Once these items are imported, the next step is Stock Sage, and you update them all the way through. Gabby, back to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So the next piece we're going to talk about is going to be the AvidXchange Pay. As Mark had mentioned, we do have over 400,000 suppliers in the network. And again, the portal is going to look just like the AvidXchange Invoice. It's just going to have that additional tab. But it's going to give you visibility into all your payments and provide a secure, faster way for your vendors or suppliers to receive payment. And as Mark had mentioned, we have 3 different ways that we're able to pay those vendors, and that's through a virtual card, which is sponsored by MasterCard. It's safe, secure. They'll receive the credit card information, and once the payment has been processed, then that's no longer available for them. That way, there's no ability to do credit card fraud. We also have AvidXchange Direct Pay, where we will do a direct deposit to that supplier. And then we do still, cut checks to the suppliers. But again, as that AvidXchange network grows, we see this less and less. And what would that payment delivery look like? On average, it is 3 days. We have the payment which is approved. Then once it's approved, then we will issue the virtual card. And once our virtual card has been accepted, and then the funds are transferred, and then it is available for the supplier on the 3rd day. So again, you log into the portal like you did with the AvidXchange Invoice. You will see the payments that are already, once the invoice has been approved, you'll see the payments that are available for approval. You can select them, add comments. Again, you can remove those columns as we did with the invoice. You'll see the, again, the batching information that's available, details on the payment items. And then once it's approved, it will go into queue, and then you can see, here where it is in the process. You can click the image here to drill down to the invoice available for it. You can see the check that was distributed if it is a check. And it's a pretty straightforward product. And again, we have a lot of clients that are using it, and Mark had mentioned, there are some incentives, when you do use the AvidXchange Pay network. And that's something, we can do a free analysis for you at any time to see, what that will look like for you. And again, you don't have to do both, the AvidXchange Invoice and Pay. A lot of our clients do choose to use both products, and you could also, just do the AvidXchange Pay. It's really up to you and, what your company is looking for. So Mark, I do want you to share, that great success story we had with Maxwell Group, and then after that we will talk about, some questions, and we'll take the poll at the end of the webinar.
Great, yeah, thanks, Gabby. Great job on the demos for Avid Invoice and Avid Pay, and thank you, Rebecca, for showing off the new Sage 100 enhanced integration. I think it's fantastic. So yeah, the Maxwell Group was one of our clients that signed up last year on the Sage Intact platform. And Rebecca Beam is the controller there. We've got a fantastic video that I believe we're putting together a landing page that the SWK team can share with you after this call. So look for that, or talk to your SWK sales rep about getting a copy of this video. It's about 2-3 minutes long. We showed it off at the Greensboro Empower event earlier this year, and it's a really great one to actually hear it directly from Rebecca. But I'll try to paraphrase some of the things that she covered, or covers, I should say, in the video. And really, there were 4 areas that were important to her and her team for choosing AvidXchange as their AP automation provider. The first one really being visibility. When you look at a solution that's based in the cloud, excuse me, I had a cough there. Solutions in the cloud, you really want to have something that you can access from any place in the world, anytime, 24/7, and that's really the power that we give you. So imagine, we have customers that we had one that recently texted her salesperson. She was in Rome, Italy, taking vacation with her husband, and she texted her salesperson, said, "Thank you, AvidXchange. I'm here on vacation, spending time with my husband in Rome, Italy, and I'm approving invoice and payments." I mean, that's kind of the power that we give you. So the good news is you can access the system anywhere. Bad news, I guess you have to do some work on vacation when you're out, right? But imagine, again, you've got, approvals needed for a check or a payment over $10,000, and your CEO is on vacation in Hawaii, your CFO is at a conference in Orlando, and you're in, Kansas City or New Jersey or wherever you happen to be. And instead of waiting for them to come back in the office to sign approvals, you can actually send the approvals electronically to them over the web. And that's really the power of that cloud solution that Rebecca enjoys. So having that visibility, having the ability to invoice route those invoices from to anyone in the world, anywhere in the country, was hugely important to them. So I'd say those are 2 of the big benefits. And then also the time, really it enabled her to shorten the amount of time that her and her staff spent on month-end close, quarter-end close, year-end close. A lot of folks that go on to AvidXchange realize that audits that used to be painful, looking up copies of invoices and copies of check numbers, doing the dumpster diving, those gray metal filing cabinets, were eliminated. Instead of having to go from her desk to go to those gray metal filing cabinets, she can simply go onto her laptop from her desk, or again, look it up on her phone, wherever she happened to be, to check on copies of invoice or checks if somebody had a question about it, whether it was an auditor or somebody in the executive team. So that really was a huge time saver for her in her closing times. And then the last one, as I mentioned earlier about the virtual card adoption, her, like many of our other customers, was hugely surprised at the number of her vendors that accepted a virtual card payment. Again, she was one of those doubting Thomases that said, "Oh, my vendors will never take a virtual card," never happened. We did the vendor match analysis, and I think over 19% of her vendors were accepting virtual card, and I think it's already jumped to 23 to 25% as we began to enroll more of their vendors. So what that means is that the initial amount of rebates that she was promised by AvidXchange actually went up as we actually enrolled more of her vendors onto the network. So those are, again, were the 4 big benefits. Again, we'll get you guys a copy of the video. You can hear it directly from Rebecca, but I thought it was those are important things to share with the team here.
Thanks, Mark. That's a great story. And we want to be able to have you be able to share your success story as well. So again, if you are interested in looking at Avid, in the poll here, it will be available where you can put in there if you want a custom demo available to you, if you just want a little bit more information, you're unsure about the solution and want to, do a little bit more research, or if you're just here to learn, and that's great too. And you can also reach out to your customer account manager or myself at the end of the call. You will be receiving this webinar via email and that video that Rebecca has shared with us from the Maxwell group. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and see if we have any questions. And feel free to put them into the question box if you have any. And while we wait for questions to be populated, I'm just going to go over a few that we typically see from our customers, and Mark will be giving our answers. So Mark, I have a question. How does invoice payment information get into your accounting system?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gabby. As you showed earlier with that one slide about the 3 ways that invoices are brought into the system and indexed by our index team. Again, customers can choose to scan their own invoices. I laugh. There's a lot of document management companies out there that say they have AP automation, but I, for one, am like I like to scan documents like I like to shake a can of soda up in my car. It's not very fun. So if you like scanning, you can certainly scan your own invoices and send them to us via email, and we'll index them for you in the system. But the 2 ways that people really would prefer to do it is, one, have their vendors and suppliers mail those invoices that are in paper form to our facilities. We'll actually do the scanning for you, update those in the system, and literally you'll get a notification via email on your phone or your laptop, wherever, however you get your inbox information. They'll say, hey, you've got 20 invoices that came in today, or 30 invoices, or 10 invoices, whatever that number is. And the other way, obviously, is that we'll set up an inbox for you. It's whatever your company name is at AvidXchange.com. It's you will train your vendors and suppliers to email those PDF format invoices to us as well. Once those come to us, again, our index team looks over, verifies the validity of the invoice, checking header line detail, things like that, and then they'll put it through the system. If they tag an exception or see something that could be potentially fraud, they'll flag it as an alert and send your team a notification that you may want to double check something. Or maybe you had an invoice come in for $1,000, but somebody wrote in, it's a catering bill, and they wrote $100 in red ink, right? Well, we know red ink doesn't really show up on OCR all that well, so our index team might flag that as an exception for you. That's just one example. Gabby?
Thanks, Mark. Okay, looks like we do have a question from a customer. It says, will the scanned invoice stay in Sage system, or is it just a PDF hyperlink?
Yeah, it would be a hyperlink. In fact, I'm not even sure. I think in this case, all of it's really hyperlinked because we're storing this in the cloud. We run our entire solution on the Microsoft Azure platform. So it's very secure. I think there's really, you're going to see everything moving to one of 3 clouds out there. It's going to be either Google, Amazon, or Microsoft. We decided to go down the Microsoft path, and because of that, the solution is very secure. It's got all the compliances that you'd probably suggest or see from any multi-million-dollar data center solution out there. And again, anytime you look up things, you just hit the hyperlink, and we keep copies of invoices and payment data for at least 7 years, I think is legally we're required to do, but we have customers who have been on the system for almost 15 plus years, and we haven't deleted a single invoice or payment file. So it's pretty cool that you can look up stuff from 10 plus years ago.
Thanks, Mark. And then I know one of the themes today was security. As far as banking information and keeping data safe, what are the measures that AvidXchange takes?
Yeah, another great question. So even though we're not a bank, we are treated like a bank because of I forgot what the actual law is, but it's like a financial sender-receiver act kind of law. And so what that does is anybody that's actually sending and receiving financial information, all of our team, in fact, we just went through compliance training in October. All 1,100 plus employees at AvidXchange have to complete this. Even myself, I had to go through this, even though I don't really get involved in the day-to-day touching of invoices and payment data. But we go through anti-money laundering training, OFAC compliance for looking for funds that are coming in potentially from terrorist organizations or things of that nature, PCI, HIPAA compliance, hard security requirements. So we have physical data cards you've got to use to get in and out of the building. So we get trained on those sorts of things. We have a security staff, obviously, in our facility to monitor who comes in and out of the building. We're very careful about that. So yeah, think of us, even though we're not a bank, we have the same rules and restrictions and requirements that any bank would have to take care of your data and be sure it's safe. And again, the fact that I mentioned earlier, we're on the Microsoft Azure platform. We feel great about the security and compliance, regulatory compliance around our cloud platform now as well.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, we have 2 more questions, and it looks like most of you have taken the poll and voted of how we would like to follow up with you. Just again, before we shut down the webinar, if you can just go ahead and vote there. Again, seeing a custom demo of Avid, just in some information, or just here to learn. So 2 more questions, Mark. How long does a typical implementation look like?
Yeah, it's great. We've actually shared data with SWK, and I feel free to follow up with your SWK salesperson to kind of walk you through that. But we have a couple slides really talk you through how simple our implementation process is. We have customers that have been up and running in under 10 days, and some that can take up to 60 to 90 days. But we typically have about a 45-day guarantee. We like to get you up and running, and most of the delays usually are not on our end, usually on the customer's end, because you guys, life happens and you have lots of things and priorities. But we'll give you a 6-week project timeline plan, and our goal is to stay on that timeline. As long as both sides are hitting their milestones, you should be up and running within 45 days.
Okay, great, Mark. And then another thing too, at the end of the year, everybody always gets busy with holidays, so that's another thing to keep people more mindful of. Okay, so one last question, and I think this is a great one, Mark. So if I'm not sure about AP automation and is it going to be a good fit for my organization, what are some pain points or milestones as far as invoice quantity, payment quantities, would I want to start evaluating automating my AP process?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it was really funny. We had a bake-off recently. I was at the Sage Intact conference in Nashville, Tennessee recently, and I was shared this with some other folks, team members at SWK as well, where there was about 80 people in the room, and it was us, actually one of our clients, and 4 other clients that were representing 4 other AP automation solutions. And the first question came up was, hey, I know you guys are all here to hear about AP automation. How many of you today are currently using an AP automation solution in-house? And only about 3 or 4 hands went up. And then the next question was, well, who was actually thinking about doing AP automation in 2019? And about 40 hands ran up. So, this is a real hot priority for many companies around the U.S. A lot of finance professionals looking at this, and the resounding answer that we got from the panel was, don't delay, do it right away, because it's really a lot less painful than people think. And even if you're doing 100 or 150 invoices a month and 100 or 150 payments a month, there are solutions out there like AvidXchange that are very cost effective and will get you up and running and give you more time back in your day. And really that's the biggest pain point you have to look at is, how much time per day are you really spending on these manual, tedious labor tasks around your invoices, scanning, mailing out checks and putting stamps on envelopes and doing that sort of thing, answering vendor calls, dealing with month-end closes that are taking you away from time with your family and friends, spending time during the holidays, end of your audit when you'd rather be having fun decorating for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever, right? So you have to really look at your own internal process to determine how much time you're currently wasting on manual processes, and to see if that threshold, even if it's 100, 150 invoices or payments a month, at kind of that very low end, that will get you the ROI you need to justify this. And I will tell you, certainly if you're in the 500 to 1,000 or more invoices and payments per month, then AvidXchange is really a no-brainer for you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, and again, everyone, if just any last words before we stop the webinar, I want to thank everybody for attending, and we will be sending out the information that was provided here today. And again, if you would like to see a deeper dive of AvidXchange Invoice and Pay, we'd be happy to set that up through your customer account manager. All right, well, thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.